Hi, everybody. Today on our new agent training, we're going to be discussing converting Lookie-Loos. So in this market, there are not enough houses to go round. So I would say that you might have what you think is a Lookie-Loo right now, but it may really just be there is not the house for them. And that's okay. That's not who we're talking about. We're not talking about the client you've had for a year and you've had them for a year because the inventory is so low. We're talking about true Lookie-Loos, the ones who maybe you met at an open house because they stopped in to eat a cookie and say hi and tour the house. And then they're like, sure, we'd like to look at houses. But they just never get serious about any of the houses you've been showing them. Lookie-Loos could be Lookie-Loos for several reasons. I would like to give you just a couple of red flags to kind of look out for. The biggest red flag that in my experience that I've found to identify unsuccessful buyer relationships, I'll call it that way, would be when I've got one of the decision makers with me. So when the wife or the husband or one of the two people says to me, oh, well, it'll just be me. But when I've narrowed it down, then, Betty, Tim, whoever will come and take a look at that one if I want to make an offer on it. In general, that means only one person wants to move. And the other person is like, I am tired of hearing about moving. I don't want to come look at houses. But they're going to have you drag them all over town looking at houses. That is probably not going to be successful. Okay. We have just helped extract a client out of a very messy transaction where the client decided to make an offer without their partner's knowledge. I think their partner knew they were going to buy a house, but the partner was not part of the selection process. So unfortunately, that got very messy when the partner decided, no, we're not buying this house. Well, I promise you there's no button on that contract that just says, never mind. So that was very messy. It consumed mine and the agent's life for a good bit of time till we could figure a way out of that contract. So make sure you have both decision makers with you. Even if it means you have both decision makers with you while you're having the initial conversation. I get it if one of them has a job that really makes it hard for them to look at houses, especially in this market, when the house goes on the market and you have to see it that day. I get it if you've got a third shift worker or you've got somebody who works 12-hour shifts or 15-hour shifts. I get it that I may have to only meet one of them. But both parties should be at that initial meeting to determine what they're looking for. You need both parties' information. And I have like an interview form and a list of questions that I will use at the beginning of my relationship with buyers. I do not send it in one email to both of them. I send it individually to each of them and ask each of them to fill that out for me. I'm doing that because I want to see where they align and more importantly, where they don't align. Okay. Oftentimes it's price. Oftentimes they have different opinions as to what they want to spend on a house. So what I'm looking for and trying to identify is where are we going to be bumping our head? So if one of them is unwilling to go above $200,000, but the other one's list of search criteria has us above $200,000, we have to get realistic and I have to do an education on them. Now, I will tell you, you cannot be a real estate agent without spending time with your clients. Some of that time is not fruitful, but it may be educational. So if I'm going to go show them 4 or 5 houses in the beginning that I know don't work for them, I may still choose to show them to them because I want to illustrate to them what $200,000 will buy. Because I may need to be educating the party that doesn't want to spend as much money on what that $200,000 will buy for them. And if it's unrealistic, we need to know that up front. One thing I will not do is I will not do what they do on those TV shows where they go show them $275,000 house that has all of their search criteria and say, you love it? It's exactly what you're looking for. Oh, you need $75,000 more dollars. I can't stand it when they do that on TV shows. I get that it's an education, that they're shopping outside of their budget, but you've just made them fall in love with outside of their budget, right? It's very difficult to go back now and show them $200,000 and have them get excited about that, okay? So instead, I want to show them what $200,000 will buy. And then other things I'm looking for, red flags. And it's not just about not wasting my time. It's about making sure their expectations are met. It's making sure that they enjoy the house they ultimately purchase, right? I don't want them to feel like they got the consolation prize when they finally get their house, okay? So other things I'm looking for. If I am constantly being sent listings that didn't show up in my search that I've set up for them, it's probably because they do not match the criteria that they have told me they want. So I take that search criteria that they have provided to me very seriously. I put it into the MLS under the contact management section, and I enter a subscription so that now anything that comes on the market matching that list of search criteria is going to email them to them automatically. If they are texting me or emailing me properties that didn't show up in that search, it better be because it was put in an MLS that isn't in our area, right? It was put in maybe the New River Valley MLS, except it's here in Roanoke, okay? Because my search on our MLS wouldn't have caught that. But if it's because it's outside of our search criteria, I want to know why. Why are they willing to go outside of that search criteria to look at this house? And oftentimes it has less square footage than they've said they have to have. And sometimes I'll show that house to them. A lot of times I'll just try to draw their attention back to their search criteria and say, hey, you know what? Every time we've been in a house that has less than 1,000 square foot on the entry level, you have noticed that it feels too squishy, that the rooms feel small, that you feel like you guys will be bumping into each other, that the kitchen isn't big enough. Talk to me about why we feel like this one might be different when we get there. And if they say something like, well, in this one, they took out the wall between the kitchen and the dining room, and now it's just one big eat-in kitchen. Okay, then maybe that 950 square foot entry level functions better than an 1,100 square foot entry level, okay? But it's about having that conversation with them, and it's about truly knowing what in the search criteria is most important. So I have had a client in recent years who she needs a house because of her family. She needs a house that has a first floor, like an entry level bedroom and bathroom. She doesn't want that. She is not the one with the mobility issues. She wants a more traditional style, 2-story, bedrooms up, public space on the entry. She wants that. That is what appeals to her. And the neighborhood in which she's looking in, Grandin, is mostly bungalows, 2 stories. There are very few ranches. So she would keep sending me properties that did not match the mobility needs of her family. I get it. She's frustrated that she's going to have to get what she feels is a boring ranch. Okay. I understand that, but we can't keep looking at 2 stories, expecting them to function properly for her. Okay. And it's meant that when we were going through that process, I would have to remind her that as cute as that kitchen is, unfortunately, I don't see the mobility solution we need for the entry-level bedroom and bathroom. Maybe she says, please, can we just go see it anyway? Maybe I'm willing to do that. Maybe I'm not. It depends. If I did go do it, I would consider that an opportunity to continue to build rapport with my client and to use it as another educational moment to say, oh, I'm so frustrated too. I see again this floor plan does not work for you and your family. Okay. But I'm going to go into that knowing I'm not selling her that house. I am instead educating her again on what's going to work for her and what isn't. Okay. So that's just a gentle guiding back to the search criteria. Maybe we're going to change our search criteria. And that's why when I do a subscription on the contact management, where if anything comes on the market, it's going to automatically email them. I'm going to make my message not be, hey, Trudy, check out these houses. That's not going to be my message. My message is going to be, hey, Trudy, below is a link to a property or properties that match our current search criteria. And then I'm going to put a colon and I'm going to say, at least 3 bedrooms, at least 2 bathrooms, entry-level bedroom, laundry, not in the basement, within the city limits of Roanoke City, under $300,000. And then I'm going to drop down and I'm going to say, if any of the homes in this link look suitable, please give me a call and we'll set up a showing. I'm going to make sure that search criteria is in that subscription auto email because I want to remind them every time what we're looking for. Because oftentimes I'll have them reply back to me and go, you know, I forgot we were only looking up to 300,000. Can we bump that up to 325? So I'm reminding them, if I don't put that search criteria in there, they sometimes don't remember what they had indicated to me was going to be acceptable. By the same token, if they're sending me properties via Zillow or Realtor.com or Trulia, and I'm noticing that those properties do not match the search criteria that I am running on MLS, I'm going to shoot them a text message back and say, hey, this one's above that $300,000 threshold. Are you comfortable with bumping that up to 325? Because I noticed the last 2 properties you sent me were listed at 320. And they may say, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, we paid off a credit card and now we can actually pay more per month towards our mortgage payment. Okay. So if you want to be successful, you are constantly looking at and tweaking their search criteria so that they can be successful in finding the right home. I also, and again, use this advice for when we're not in this market. In a regular market, if they tell me they'll go up to 350, I'm setting that to 360 because I know we can probably make an offer less than list price. Right now, not so much. It's flip-flopped. But when we get back to a regular market, I oftentimes will overshoot their price point, and I will explain that to them. I do not want them to feel like, ugh, that realtor trying to upsell me. What I'm going to say is, hey guys, we're going to try to negotiate. So I'm going to overshoot your price threshold by about $10,000 just so that we don't miss something that may be perfect and maybe the seller would consider a price reduction. Okay. Every month, hop on your contact management, look at your open files on the contact management in MLS. Look at your clients that you have still running on active MLS searches and active subscriptions, and go ahead and just briefly run through it. If you look at their saved search that's associated with their subscription, it's going to give you a summary of what you chose as their search criteria. Make sure it still fits. So every month, commit yourself to doing that. Put that time block that on your calendar so that you know on the first Monday of the month, you're going to just breeze through your contact management. This is only having you review your current active clients. So maybe you have 10 buyers who are actively still searching. It's not going to take you very long to leaf through 10 saved searches and make sure that those search criteria are still updated and functioning accurately for your clients. And please don't be too narrow in your search. I ask a lot of questions in my buyer interview. However, I'm not going to put all of that criteria into the MLS saved search, because if they have to have a fence in the backyard, I'm probably not going to check on my search criteria on the MLS fenced backyard or fenced yard. There is a field on the MLS for fenced yard, but it's an optional field. So I'm not sure every agent is filling out every single amenity on the MLS when they do their data entry onto the MLS input form. And I would hate for us to miss the perfect house that even has a fenced in backyard, but maybe that wasn't indicated on the MLS. So something like fenced backyard or garden space, or there's some other ones that I think are just a little too narrow for me to put on my search, because I'm afraid when I do that, it's going to restrict the search so much that I'm rarely going to have a property show up in there. So sometimes I will ignore, for the purposes of setting up their saved search, some of their search criteria, but it's in the back of my mind. And I may explain to them, and for example, in the case of we need a fenced in backyard, I'm going to have a conversation with them. If I find you the perfect property, are you willing to look at putting in your own fence once you've closed? And if they go, sure, then I'm going to say, with your permission, I'm not going to put fenced backyard, but take a look at the photos. I think you'll find a lot of them that I'm going to send you will already have a fenced backyard, but I'm not sure that they're all being consistently identified on the MLS. So I would hate for us to miss one that has a fenced yard, but they just didn't mark that on the MLS sheet. So I may do the same with bathrooms. They're telling me I have to have 2 bathrooms. I may have a conversation with them to say, would you mind, since we're not seeing very many search results, may I indicate that you have to have 1.5 bathrooms at least? Now, a lot of the ones that will be sent to you will have 2 bathrooms, but what if there's a 1.5 bath that may function well for you and you love everything else about the house? Would that really be a deal killer for you? If they say, yes, that's a deal killer. We have 7 children. Fine, that's a deal killer. And I'm going to put in there at least 2 bathrooms. Okay. But it's just investigating further, talking to your clients further, because they're basically giving you their wish list, right? They're not saying everything they identify on their wish list is going to be a deal killer for them or a deal breaker for them. So that interview process should not just be they answer your questions and then y'all never talk about it again. You're going to want to talk about it continually throughout the process. They may even grow to consider other areas of town that they had not been willing to consider earlier in the process. They may have said, I want to be 10 minutes from work. Well, after 4 months of searching for a house, they may decide they're fine with being 20 minutes away from work. Okay. Now, what have I forgotten? Let's see. Well, one thing we didn't touch on is, how do you know what to ask them? How do you know what are the right questions? So I've been working on a template for a fillable buyer interview form. So that is something we will be rolling out as a quick tool in the coming month and a half. I've got about another month to squeeze, as much Canva help out of my eldest as I can. She's here working for the summer as her internship. And we have really found out she's great on Canva. So she's been making lots of templates for us, and we're going to start doling those out now so that you guys can start customizing those and using those. So if you have one that you're currently using, if you don't mind sharing, send it over to me, and we'll try to incorporate some of those questions into the buyer interview form. The real trick is to ask important questions, but not so many that they don't fully get into it and fill it all out. We try to keep it to just 1 page. 2 page. I mean, you think about when you go to the doctor's office and then you have to fill out 7 pages of your medical history, it is a pain. So we're trying to keep this upbeat and promising, right? So we're going to keep it to a 1-page buyer interview form. We may expand on that later, have maybe additional pieces that go with it. Maybe 1 month into showing them houses, you can provide them an updated interview form to say, now that we've been looking at houses for a month, how would you correct your search criteria? What areas have you decided to be more flexible on, And that is something we've got in the back of our mind we'd like to create as well. It also gives you another reason to contact them a month into showing houses to say, to recognize that maybe we have not gone under contract yet. So let's talk about being proactive about how we can increase our odds at getting a house. All right, anybody have any questions about any of that or anything they'd like to talk about converting Lookie-Loos? A very important question to ask people at open houses is, obviously, are you working with an agent? But the other thing to be aware of is when they say, oh, yes, we've been looking for a house for 2 years. I might not want to pursue that much harder. Now, in this market, I can understand if that's the case. But in a regular market, when somebody tells me they've been looking for a house for 2 years, that tells me somebody in that house doesn't want to move. Or they're not in a position to borrow. Something is going on if you've been looking for 2 years, okay? Now, that's obviously different at the lake. If someone at Smith Mountain Lake says, you know, we've been looking for 5 years, that's not a red flag to me because that's a totally different market. They are looking for a home for later, and they are going to visit Smith Mountain Lake multiple years in a row to figure out where they want to live, right? So, of course, take that with a grain of salt when I give this advice. Okay, who has anything to add? Jennifer, do you have anything you want to pitch in?
One thing I'll say when I do set up my automatic searches, sometimes less is more. Especially in this market, you might find that your people are a little more flexible than they thought they were. In my case, that has been the case. I mean, we made an offer on a 2-bedroom house that I would have never shown them, but it had an unfinished basement. So they saw the possibilities of what they could put in that basement. We did not get that house, unfortunately, but I'm pretty vague. So I'm using school district for a search. I know they want in the Windy Gap elementary school district. And quite frankly, right now, all I'm doing for them is Windy Gap Elementary School. I know that's a small area, so it's not sending a million listings for them to view. But let's face it, there's not a million listings to be sent anyway.
There's only
making a very
400 listings in all if you just want to send
right. So making it pretty vague kind of opens their mind a little bit to something they may not have thought about. And that's been helpful for us. So that's what I have to add on that.
Also, I had a client years and years ago who said absolutely no oil heat. We don't want oil heat. We had it one time. We hate it. We don't want it. Well, there was a perfect house for them. And I just made them go look at it anyway. And it was way under their price point, probably because of the oil heat, that nobody had snapped it up. So they were able to purchase that and then pay to have a different heating system put in. And that worked for them. You know, they didn't have to keep the oil heat, but it was the perfect house for them. They've still not moved. And that was like 10 years ago. Like they love that house. So
I had the similar thing with oil heat. My buyer's like, absolutely no oil heat. Well, he sent me a house to look at, and I'm like, well, let me just be honest. He went to the wrong house. So we scheduled a house on one street, and he went to a house on another street. And the lady was in the yard mowing. So her agent called and said, your client's at my seller's house. So that's how we ended up seeing that one. So he did not know that that house had oil heat. But when we went in, they had just converted. They had just switched from oil heat to, I think, gas. But the oil tank was still in the basement. And when they did that, evidently, you know, sometimes oil heat has a smell, kind of that kerosene type smell. You could smell it as soon as we opened the door to the house. And he's like, this is why I don't want oil heat. The next house we went, he didn't realize had oil heat, and he sent that one to me. And I said, okay, this one has oil heat. Why are we here? And he's like, oh, I missed it. He said, this has oil heat? No odor whatsoever. So his hang up for oil heat was an odor. He associated oil heat with that kerosene smell. Come to find out, his grandmother had oil heat, and that's what happened in her house. They had a spill, the smell was there. So that was his hang up. Well, now he's open to looking at houses with oil heat because he realizes not all houses have that smell associated with oil. So it's kind of funny how that works out. But yeah, that was my first experience, and however many years I've been doing this, 14, 15 years, whatever. My client went to the wrong house. How embarrassing was that?
Do you remember that time, probably, I don't know, 15, 16 years ago, when one of our agents wrote the wrong house number? There were 2 houses on the street for sale. We got fully ratified on the wrong house.
I don't remember that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
He was the agent who was so old school when he switched firms and came to us. He just made stickers to put on his existing business cards with his new firm information on it because he didn't want to buy it.
You're talking about.
And he got fully ratified. Like the buyer's agent, the listing agent missed it too. They put the wrong house number on that contract and it was fully ratified.
Oh,
now, obviously, the owner of the property on the contract had not signed that. The seller down the street had signed it. So it was not valid, but no one discovered it until like 3 weeks in or something, right? Insanity. When I say we have seen it all, we have seen it all. So I'd forgotten that until you were telling that story. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else have anything to add about converting Lookie-Loos? Yes. Rita, let me unmute you.
I would just say that the first thing I make sure is that they're talking to a lender, because for more than one reason. One, are they qualified to buy a house, period? And two, if the last time they bought a house was 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and they're wanting to make a move and they know they're qualified to buy because they have good credit, they may not realize how far their dollars go. And they might say, we can only afford up to 250, but with the interest rates today, they might be able to add 100,000 to that.
You're absolutely right. If their existing mortgage is at 7% and they're going to go to a 2.75% interest rate on their new purchase, you're absolutely right. They could be spending, the same amount monthly on their mortgage payment, but get $100,000 more worth of house. You're absolutely right.
So if they're not willing to get with a lender and get pre-approved, to me, that's a Lookie-Loos.
Yes,
I'm gonna have to find someone else to show you something.
I need a little red flag that I can just wave in the air when these stories get told. So I can be like, that's a red flag, Rita, if they will not get pre-qualified. Yes, of course it is. Yeah. Yeah. And Lookie-Loos love to go to open houses. Like there are people who just absolutely love to, spend a Sunday afternoon cruising around open houses and eating cookies. They just love looking at houses. They watch HGTV all Saturday evening, and then they go look at houses on Sunday. It does happen. Yep. Thank you, Rita. Okay. So my last thing I want to give you today is your Get Business Quick idea. And that is circulate, for heaven's sakes. You have to circulate. You have to join clubs. You have to volunteer. You've got to be meeting new people. So volunteering is a great way to do that. That allows you to give back to your community. It allows you an opportunity, and I'm not saying this is why you should volunteer, but it does give you an opportunity to publicize that charity that you have selected to volunteer for and focus on them on your Facebook business page. And perhaps do a fundraiser on your Facebook business page for that particular charity. But if you're also posting pictures of you volunteering there, then your client base, your friends and family are going to know that you truly are committed and working at a base level with that volunteer organization, with that charity. And they're going to be more willing to help share your post or contribute to your fundraiser or come out and volunteer with you. I think a lot of people wish they were volunteering. And I know a lot of people just we run our daily lives and we'll donate, something when somebody asks, but to truly go out and give of your time and connect with people in the community, it's something we all wish we did more of, but the opportunities aren't necessarily in our face to be able to do it, which is why I love that RVAR has a community service committee and they make these opportunities available to us. I went and had a tour of the rescue mission a couple of weeks ago, and I can tell you just from that visit, I have now shifted that I will no longer make my donations to the place where I had been dropping off donations, and I will now be giving them all to the rescue mission. The rescue mission thrift shop does a wonderful job. And what I've found is during the tour, they were explaining to me that sometimes when those donations come in, they will set back certain items. And folks who are transitioning out of the shelter are given vouchers. They're not given things to set up their new apartment or their new housing. They're given vouchers so they can go shop for themselves. They can pick their own things. As soon as they come into the rescue mission, they're able to be given vouchers to go to the thrift store, pick their own clothes. What do they want to wear? What matches their style? What makes them feel good? And so I will now be making all of my drop-off donations to the rescue mission. And the work that they're doing there is just phenomenal. So when someone is transitioning out and going into more secure housing, they can go over there and shop for coffee table, a lamp, a chair, a dinette set. And those are coming from donations that we in the community are donating to the rescue mission. So that's my little shout out to say, get out there and volunteer. They obviously need volunteers. Everyone needs volunteers. The pandemic hit volunteer opportunities hard. And it has made a lot of these volunteer run charities really struggle to fill the role that these volunteers were filling. So it's time to get back out in the community and start volunteering again. Anybody have a question? Any new business?